Well, I know people are still logging on, but we've hit the top of the hour, so I am going to actually launch the event. I'm Scott Osterweil. I'm a research scientist at MIT Education Arcade and MIT Game Lab, but I'm also the president and creative director of Learning Games Network. I'm part of the organizing committee, and we're all really excited to welcome everybody here. Many of you, of course, have been at previous Connected Learning Summits. Last year was the first year we did it online, purely out of necessity. And we decided that actually it was a pretty good model, even though we've shifted the model a little bit, confined it to 2 days rather than spreading it out over a month. We thought that the affordances of doing it online really were a benefit to the community, so we're sticking with that happily. I do want to start, since I'm speaking from MIT, I'd like to at least do our land acknowledgement, which is that MIT acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. And I'm guessing that applies for where all of us sit. So anyway, starting with that, I just want to, again, welcome everybody for coming. And if we can advance the slides, we'll just say a little bit about, these are your hosts, those of us who sort of put together this event. And we can give people a moment, and here are the partners that have in some way contributed to our, to making this event possible. And this is the committee, the organizing committee, and take a moment to read all the names, but I want to take this moment to say that while it was a great committee of lots of people contributing, I just want to call out Mimi, who's really been the driving force behind all of this. She's really kept us moving every step of the way, and it wouldn't be possible without her. So, so I want to make sure that everybody, while you read this list, particularly we all thank her for her efforts. And as well as the staff who's put in long hours on this, again, wouldn't be possible without all of their work. So, and I'll turn the floor over now to you, Mimi.
Great, thanks, Scott, for that special shout out, and also just really delighted to be kicking off this event and trying a new format in virtual. We really appreciate all of you joining and sort of jumping in and continued innovation and experimentation with online events. Just to pile on some of the acknowledgements, I did want to give a special shout out to Don Miller and Alyssa Alves, who have been doing really a lot of the heavy lifting in the coordination and the technical setup and all the behind the scenes. And I think most of you have probably been in touch with them at some point. If you have any ongoing questions, just a quick Whova tip is to go to the community area. Well, you'll see some forums, and there's an Ask an Organizers Anything forum if you get lost. So just a quick tip before we kick things off. I wanted to, take this moment to introduce the opening plenary. As we emerge from the pandemic, I really wanted to invite a group of speakers to kick off this event who have had really, difficult experiences like all of us did during the plenary, but also really engaged in a lot of research and innovation about the changes wrought around online learning and community connection and the racial reckoning during the pandemic. To really, I think a lot of us are still trying to get our mojo back from all of the shifts and changes. And so this session was really set up to say, look, there was a lot of hard stuff that happened during the pandemic, but we also learned a lot. And even as we sort of rush to get back to normal, what are the learnings and innovations that we can carry forward from those really challenging times, the really difficult conversations we were having during the pandemic? So this panel really features a group of innovators and thinkers who have done a lot of hands-on work, but a lot of deep thinking about these issues around equity, around technology innovation, around youth-centered work. So I'm really delighted to introduce the panel. Jal Mehta, who's a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, will be moderating. And Jal, you've probably seen some of his reports. He's done a lot of work with Justin Reich, who's a longtime friend of Connected Learning, and they did a lot of research during the pandemic about how schools and educators were responding. Jessica Cheney, Teen Learning Lab and department manager of the Memphis Public Library, who leads the Cloud 901 Teen Learning Lab, teen-centered technology and maker space, obviously dear to our hearts in Connected Learning ever since the U-Media movement. So really inspiring example of youth-centered work that's community connected. Adam Koulis, Director of Innovation, Learning, and CT at Tacoma Public Schools, who I had the good fortune of connecting with during the pandemic as we were exploring online project-based learning experiences, and was just really inspired by how Adam and the district is taking forward a vision of online learning that is really connected learning in the best sense possible. And Guillermo Izabal, or Bill, who's the president and founder of Listo America, part of the Computer Clubhouse Network, which we've also had the good fortune of partnering with the Connected Learning Lab for many, many years, because Listo America really embodies so many of our core values of connected learning around being culturally sustaining, supporting young people's social emotional learning, being responsive to community needs in ways that are really, really inspiring, but also innovating in a lot of the online learning that happened during the pandemic. So I'm sure Bill will have a lot of lessons to share, and I will hand it off to Jal to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Great to see everybody. I had the chance to, do a pre-call with our panelists, and I'm excited. They have a lot of interesting, hopeful, optimistic things to say about what we can draw from the pandemic. Change is hard, and the pandemic forced change of various sorts. And I think one of our tasks as a community is to build on the best of those things that have emerged and think about how we could carry them forward under quote unquote normal, though never ending pandemic circumstances. As we start, everybody has access to the chat, and I'd love if folks could put into the chat, consistent with our theme, like one good thing that came out of the pandemic. Could be a work thing, a personal thing, a reflection, just something positive that in some way emerged from the pandemic. So let's see. I see some virtual conferences, recognition that people are human beings. Meeting with some friends from afar, organizing your home space, less commuting, compassion, I like that one. Bob is clearly here for this panel, a huge opportunity to really change learning. Maggie spent more time with her kids, and she listed that as a good thing, so it's good. Family time. Vanessa says to remember to slow down. I myself have felt that that's a really important theme, especially in schools where we're kind of like constantly rushing kids from one content area to the next, like to what end? And the slowing down seems important. Reevaluating relationships, relationship with work. Adults were more aware and less judgy about kids gaming and social connection online. Interesting. All right, great. So that sets us up well, and let's continue to use this chat as a kind of interactive space where you can add thoughts, questions, reactions, push back on things people said. As best we can, let's try to use this space as an interactive one. All right, great. So Jessica, let's start with you. You know, we think of a library as a physical place that people go. What happened with your library during the pandemic, and what can other people who may not be running a library sort of take or learn from your experiences?
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the panel. I'm Jessica. I work with Cloud 901. I'm the program manager. We're a teen learning lab that services 13 to 18 in Memphis Public Libraries. And we basically, or I manage a staff of about 11 people that design and implement STEM, or as everybody may be more familiar with, STEAM based learning. And we also do a lot of project-based learning, connected learning. And so what we saw with the pandemic is Memphis Public Libraries is a division under the city of Memphis. And so we work with about 17 other divisions, and we closed for about a month, and then we opened right back up. And what we initially did was partner with a lot of other divisions and organizations across the community in response to COVID-19. And what that looked like was us partnering with our Metropolitan Interfaith Association, and we boxed food, and we were the drivers because they had a number of people who weren't able to do that, and were able to really go out into the communities with food, with books, with other access and materials from the library, which was really great. We worked with our Parks and Recs, which is another division under the city, to get out valuable information about COVID-19 and other divisions to disseminate information, especially around social services that were needed. And what that was just a great opportunity to just really get out into our community. We like to think of ourselves as a community anchor, but to really get out and reach out into those communities that were very much underserved, and communities who couldn't readily come to us, especially now that, you know, restrictions were happening with COVID-19. And I think the biggest takeaway was one of the things we would always say in our divisions was how siloed we were. And to really be able to say, okay, this is something where we really need each other, and how can we connect the best in our divisions to be able to serve our community. So I think that was really great to be able to do that. In addition to that, we shifted to online programming, I think, like, you know, like most people, which was something that the biggest takeaway was us seeing that with that online programming, we weren't just touching people in our community, but communities across the country. So we would host a program and we would get people in from Canada and Miami and different places like that, which was great because what that meant were people who knew more about us, and we could you know, spread our work and our programming and opportunities to them. But also we were able to work with people who normally wouldn't come to the library for you know, a myriad of reasons, who maybe, you know, they had anxiety issues, so you know, social settings were things that, you know, they just weren't able to do, and they were able to access us at a comfort level that worked best for them. And so we were able to see those things. I think another thing that we saw with that shift to online programming is that we had a lot more families. Although we, you know, we service youth, I mean, they're home and we couldn't tell a parent they couldn't, but what we saw a lot of is like when we had our camps, we saw a lot of parents working right alongside their kids building the robot that we gave them. And we just thought that was really cool because we saw that it was an opportunity for the family to get together and bond. And we also saw that parents who had no idea who we were really become advocates for us and really be able to say, hey, this program is really great. You should take your kid there, you know. And so those were just some things that we saw and what we were able to do with the libraries. And I think the last part of it was really understanding and seeing that we need to recognize in every aspect when we talk about our programming or our services where our barriers are, even when we don't readily see them. So we shifted to online programming, and all of those things that I just mentioned were wonderful. But what about people who don't have internet in their homes? What about people who don't still have those types of access? What about when we have a program and we're requiring a list of supplies? So it really made us take a step back and go, okay, if we're offering this program and we wanted to reach as many people as possible, what at every point from the time that we advertise this program to the time that we put it on and we close this out, what barriers are there? How can we break those down so that the people who really want to be a part of the program can do that? So that looked like hotspots that we started checking out. That looked like giving supplies and takeaway bags, especially for youth. A lot of the things that we do, we also tried to make very accessible. So if you couldn't come up, maybe we really pushed ourselves to say, okay, how could we produce this program with things that they could just readily grab in their home? So, or they could go to the box store and get, if they couldn't, order from Amazon or something, or the brick and mortar store, excuse me, if they couldn't, order from Amazon or something, or once again, just being able to package all those supplies and say, this is for you. I mean, we would give it to them anyway if they were in-house, so why not be able to do that? And so what we saw, was just being able to break those down, people going, okay, wow, yes, thank you, because now it went from, oh, I can't do that because they're asking for, you to have $50 worth of art supplies to, create this, or be a part of this camp. Now it's for your youth to be able to do that. And we recognize that with a population that is about 30 to 40% below the poverty line, we know that people are making very serious decisions around, do I get or to send my child to an enrichment type of opportunity that could be great, that could spark a passion, that could continue on your interest, or do I feed them? So how do we work to,
So can I just break in there for a second, Jessica? So a couple things that I'm hearing that I feel like are really promising. One is this kind of holistic vision of students and families and what they need. I feel like sometimes we get like in a very small box, like, you're supposed to be a library and someplace else is supposed to be teaching algebra and so forth. And like, okay, great. But at this particular moment, like families need food and they, and so I really appreciate that holistic lens. And then also, I appreciate the intersection of innovation and equity, that sometimes equity acts as a brake, like especially in large bureaucracies, people will say, well, we can't do this for everybody, so like, we're not going to do it at all. And what I hear you saying is we're coming up with ideas that we think are good and promising. And then we're sort of, we're iterating on those ideas and thinking about like, can we take the idea that we have and come up with ways that lots of different people could get access to that idea? Do we need to revise the idea a little bit because the full-blown version of our idea is too expensive for everybody to do, but maybe there's another version of the idea that really would work for everybody. And so I really appreciate the sort of connection between those ideas. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about that, but I want to get Bill and Adam in. So Bill, you run a thing which is a clubhouse, and you had to move online. How did that work?
That was a challenge, believe me. Let me just give a thought. First of all, I appreciate being here, and particularly since we have three different kinds of entities. We have a library, a school system, and Listo America is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's independent, so it's three different kinds of entities. And my suspicion is I'm already hearing some commonality when I hear Jessica talk some of the things that happen. Let me just quickly baseline. Listo America is an after-school program in a community that's Latino, Latina, and let me be even more specific, virtually 100% Mexican American or Mexican. And I think that's important because in cultures, there is a tendency in this country to blend all Latinos together. So I saw a program the other day in CNN and talked about the political Latinos going from one party to another party, and they covered Florida.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, then another one that talked about Puerto Ricans, not Cubans, and nothing about maybe there's a different perspective coming from a Mexican American heritage. So that's important in our context, even in our name, Listo America. The word listo in Spanish means to be prepared, to be ready for the future. And we became part of the Computer Clubhouse Network, which, as a lot of people know, started out of Mitchell Resnick out of MIT, professor of learning research at the Media Lab. And after we opened up our in-person physical clubhouse, which was in the community, we decided to apply for a license from the Clubhouse Network. And now the Clubhouse Network has over 100 clubhouses, 60 some in the United States and the other 30 or 40 globally around the world. And as a context, as a baseline, we work on projects, peers, connection, a lot of passion. We work in what members or our members are interested in, and playtime. So you think about all those fundamental, how should I say, the context that we have, and then the context of culture, particularly Mexican heritage culture that we have. Very easy when you have a clubhouse and they come in and we have things like creative collision. We purposely made things small so one member could bump into the other member and they can say, look, what are you working on? And, oh, man, can I join you? You know, that kind of thing. So that was kind of an exciting atmosphere in the physical setting. All of a sudden, that March 2020 came, March 17th, school systems start closing down, the local school system shut down. And all of a sudden, after school programs were highly recommended to also shut down. We shut down the physical clubhouse. We were working with UCI, a lot of Mimi's PhD candidates over there. And they said, maybe we can quickly go on a platform that we can recreate the clubhouse experience and culture overnight. And frankly, I was pleasantly surprised. In a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, they got on a Discord platform, and we were able to literally recreate the clubhouse online. It's open from after school hours, the same time, so people can get in and out. The clubhouse, physical clubhouse, people could come in and out and start working on their own projects, and with a lot of technology around them. So we tried to do the same thing that, hey, you can come in at any time. You don't have to show up at 3 o'clock or 3:30, and we closed at 7 o'clock like we normally did. So we had tried to replicate as much as possible, but we had to be innovative. We started what we call meetups, member to member, because what was happening is in the physical clubhouse, they already had relationships, physical relationships. All of a sudden we had a brand new member, very isolated. So we had moments what we call meetup to meetup, particularly introducing new members, mentors to members. And again, to make sure I'm clear, members are our youth. Those are our students that come in, usually in the middle school and high school years. Then we started the concept of what we call hybrid programs, where we would have the technology, which is usually physical, and a lot of the members would say, gee, that's nice. Both sent us 25 sets of audio systems so that people can learn how audio works and how headsets work, et cetera, et cetera. So we said, why don't we do a pickup point? So we said, hey, we announced on the Discord, like a regular schedule, we are going to have an activity that deals with learning audio. We have devices, we have materials. We have a pickup point, Saturday from noon to 3 o'clock, go to this address and you can pick up. And then conduct the sessions later on. The online almost was like a TV channel, you know, people interested in certain things would tune in at a certain time. Pardon for that. And so people would declare, I'm going to be available for some audio discussion at this time. But it still gave us a challenge because our big thing is that we're trying to be creative, not just learning technology. You know, the temptation is we have a lot of technology, you learn the technology. Hey, I'm skilled in this area or that area. But the reality is we're trying to see what you can create. What is your project with the technology? Even if you're in music, don't play an old song, create your new song. You're doing a video, and then the integration comes in when we say the people from music can maybe connect with the people with the video, so you have a musical video, you know, that kind of a thing. So we were able to do that, particularly with the hybrid ability to have both online and ability to pick up devices and things.
Mm-hmm.
The culture, very important, Mexican culture. Some of our, in fact, practically all of our mentors spoke Spanish, English and Spanish. Most of our members, frankly, were undocumented parents, not them. They were born in the United States. So the members were American students of Mexican descent. Parents were undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting thing because undocumented parents don't want to show up anything that looks legal, looks authoritative or whatever.
Yep.
And what we did is we introduced one of our mentors, Ana, who has a master's degree in Spanish and teaching Spanish. So we introduced a program in Spanish, which was an innovation. So the entire channel would be in Spanish, so that not only would she conduct some of the mentoring in Spanish, but she also was able to invite other family members that would show up. And like Jessica's experience, all of a sudden we had family members, parents, grandparents tuning in, not being afraid, as they may have been maybe at first when they went to a physical clubhouse.
All right, great. I'm going to pause you
Yeah.
there because we'll have another round and
Right.
we'll get to hear more. But I also am hearing a lot of connections with what Jessica said. So Adam, we got a chance to talk a little on the pre-call, and it seems like a lot of school systems are sort of snapping back to 2019 as quickly as they can. But it seems like you all are trying to move forward. So maybe you don't have to tell us everything you've done, but tell us a couple of things you've done. And in particular, I'm interested in like, how are you holding on to those things or expanding them or drawing on the affordances of them as we're moving back towards a more in-person environment for a lot of people?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, excited to be here. Adam Kulas, I work in the Tacoma School District, which is in Washington State. It's a large urban district, beautifully diverse, approximately 30,000 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. And so in terms of this sort of response, and you know, I guess I would start with saying I'm very fortunate to have a school board and a superintendent who embraced this pandemic as a community. With grace and empathy, and like I saw in one of the chats, like this genuine, like calm sense of urgency, right? So it's this ongoing tug of war between being reactive and then ultimately shifting gears to being proactive. And so March was the big shutdown international globally. And so we sort of began having conversations around, okay, well, with the unpredictable like realities of what's coming, let's be as proactive as possible. And so we stood up sort of a design around an online school that we originally sort of projected to have a few hundred kids. And within 48 hours, we had hit like over 3,000 within our district that had signed up. And by the time we launched school, it was 5,000 of our 30 wanted a full online experience. And so as we traveled through that, we quickly were excited to, once again, this tug of war of reactive, proactive design with kind of a solution mindset. And so as we traveled through this piece and standing this up, we had over 250 staff members. We had a community that was eager to keep their students safe in this online world. And quickly we shifted gears into evolving into high quality. And so we started to quickly assess, and it was difficult on multiple levels because you had staff who had not taught or been trained in that environment. And full circle back, it was around this empathetic approach, a lot of grace for the adult learners, for the students, and this community was born. And so for us, fast forward, and as a lot of surrounding districts have sprinted back to normal, like as you shared, kind of this 2019 version, or in some cases, if they weren't even at 2019 yet, but quickly want to sprint back to quote unquote normal. Our district has sort of embraced the idea of redefining and reimagining the buffet of options for our students in terms of defining our own new normal. So it's a fully functioning school now with a couple thousand students. And what's fun is we didn't stop there. And so as we continue to grow in enrollment and create higher quality programming, we'll also launch, based on student feedback and educator feedback in terms of our community, we'll also launch essentially a flex program that would allow a student to experience both. So they can do a brick and mortar, but they can also experience online courses, which starts to open up flexible opportunities within their schedule to do all kinds of different things. So I think that's the long and short of just the quick summary of kind of our response.
And you started with your superintendent and your board. So I'm also hearing, courage, vision, those sorts of things as anchors for some of the more programmatic changes.
Yeah, and I think it's critical. And I think what resonates with me in terms of what Jessica and Bill shared is that I think if there's multiple pride points for us in Tacoma, but I think one is we're a decade deep into our whole child initiative. And so when we go whole child, we go whole community. And so we had countless partnerships that truly in terms of a village mentality or this all hands on deck, really accelerated opportunities for us to pivot quickly and to do it with a lens of like what's best for our kids. Not this sort of sometimes reactive design will stand something up as a band-aid or a temporary solution. And we genuinely, had to build the plane in the air, but looked at it as a sustainable, scalable model, because students were, we had students that traditionally pre-pandemic had been unsuccessful in some of our brick and mortar options who thrived in this online environment. And so I think that was an early win and an early celebration and kind of epiphany of we need to continue to innovate to serve each student. And so, I could do 2 hours on personalization, but ultimately we had a vehicle and we had a set of tools and ultimately a community that rallied around personalizing the experience for each student.
So one question that I have sort of come to think is important to ask is when is a virtual environment actually better than an in-person environment? And when is it like a sort of weak facsimile of an in-person environment? Like, at the university level, I might say, I'm not sure this is entirely true, but just for the sake of argument, like, you know, if you're going to have a seminar around a table with like 8 people, like you might be better off just like having the seminar around a physical table, maybe. But online, you can, you know, bring together students from across different countries to discuss something, and you're probably not going to get that in most American universities, and that will provide a sort of diversity of perspectives that you wouldn't get in an in-person situation. So if the first one is debatable, the second one's not, but like you get the sort of the point that like sometimes the virtual environment is actually like a better medium for what you're trying to do, and sometimes it's just like it's all you had, like in the pandemic. But like if you had your choice, you would do it in person. I'm interested in what you all have learned about that. Like, are there things that you feel are sort of advantages of doing it in a virtual space, and are there things that if you had your druthers, you would rather do in person?
Well, let me start with our experience, because we had a physical after-school clubhouse that literally overnight went from physical in-person to virtual. And at first, frankly, I personally, at first I thought this is not going to work. How are we going to do this? And there were some things that we had in the personal, as I used the term, creative collision, which was simply people bumping into each other and kind of nosing around, what are you guys working on? What's that you're doing? Or somebody doing a song in the music area, and they're doing a video and then combining forces and all that. Somehow, with the hybrid model, it worked. And by that I meant that occasionally we would get together in very, during the pandemic, particularly space and 6 feet apart and all, all the rules and masks, so they would get together. So there was kind of a combination. The thing that surprised me that we were able to do remotely is go global, which for many of our kids and parents, remember the parents started getting involved, we were connecting with the clubhouse in Mexico City. And the members from Mexico City started connecting with our members virtually, which we were able to do before. And that kind of enhanced the cultural background. That's okay to be Mexican in the United States. It's proud, and it opened the eyes of many of our Mexican American students who had no idea what it was like in Mexico and the technology over there. So I thought that the virtual was very helpful in that regard. Probably unique going global.
Jessica or Adam, what do you think? Jessica, why don't you go?
I found it both ways, just as I stated with our online programs, we were able to connect with people from all over, which was really great. We had a number of people who emailed us or reached out and spoke about, having, issues with maybe mobility or transportation, or like I said, social anxiety, and probably would never come into our building. So it was great for them to be able to access those different resources. Some of it I think was also really great, like here in Memphis, they're, and I'm guessing everywhere too, but they're really big on college tours here. Organizations, churches, just so many people really pour into and take as many kids on different types of college tours. And of course that couldn't be facilitated. So one thing we did was actually ask the colleges, and a lot of them sent virtual tours that they were able to still access. And so, so we saw, just a lot of opportunities that people could still connect and see, options that they could have. And everything. But I'll say this summer, we started back in person with our summer camps. And every camp that we have had students, and this has not happened before, but we've had students come back right after that camp with the people they've made friends with in their camps and continue working on the projects they were working on in the camps or their own personal projects. And so we recently had a film camp, and one of the young ladies said, well, I'll come back. I want to work on my own film. And we said, okay. And she came in with her shot list, her cast, her crew, everybody together, everything together, and about 3 other people that were part of that camp came back to help her. So we saw that, and that was just something that never happened. They would do the camp and we might see them throughout the year, but to see them come right back after with friends that they made, you know, people that they probably would have never had a chance to interact with outside of this camp and continue to create together was just very promising, and something that's really great to hear. So I think it's both. It's, you know, great opportunities to reach out in you know, in so many different ways, just with conferences and things that I've been a part of, you know, and now have connections with people in places that I've never been. But then also seeing how, you know, that in person still has a way to cultivate things as well. So.
Yeah. Adam, what have you learned?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like everything, it's like a yes and, right? And it's fascinating, and I think really drills down or boils down for me into this this redefined understanding of connected, and so and it sparks amazing conversations. But in living professionally, which integrates personal into the world of education, you have these multi-tiered opportunities to connect with adult learners in terms of how we're teaching and growing students. And what was fascinating for us is, as we paused to, you know, constantly audit or assess kind of what we were doing in this virtual space, we found that integrating in some in-person experiences led to some really kind of innovative, very simple tech, not, you know, not these grandiose, it's going to take 6 months to design this. Like we did a working example that was probably one of my favorite of the year was our kindergarten team. And so when you have that many students, I think we had 6 kindergarten teachers. They took a field trip to the zoo once, you know, that was this year. So there were some different abilities to access some of our different community resources. They took a field trip to the zoo, and I think they had 22 students and families attend in person. But I jumped on throughout the day in our virtual space, and we had over like 72 or 75 kindergartners on Teams experiencing the zoo, interacting in the chat because we had onboarded and taught that skill. And so it's this rich experience that really comes full circle back to our, like what I would say is one of our priorities, a benchmark, if you will, around equity of access. Like, how can we create experiences and give all students these opportunities? Simultaneously, we recorded the session and now subsequently get to reutilize it with different groups, different grade levels, different students. And so it's one example of this and both, right? And so I think that's what excites me, in that, you know, I'll be the first to say that online learning is not the best path for every kid, but I'll also quickly be the one to defend that it very well could be for some. And so when I look at different models, whether it be post-secondary, whether it be our high school learners, there are some students that have thrived in this new definition of connected that is closely aligned to their engagement and ultimately increased interest. And then I think it also couples their outside world, whether it be social media, whether it be online gaming. My teenagers at the house stayed just as connected to their friends, and they love in-person engagement. They love hanging out with their buddies. And so when it shifted and we were able to go back to that, I continue to see this balance that existed prior to the pandemic in terms of their definition of connection. Now, some of the adults, myself included, has to work a little harder to understand and walk through those shoes to have a broadened perspective of it, because that's not the world that I came up in, nor did I have to grapple with a pandemic at 11 or 16. So yeah, I think it's this new perspective.
Yeah. Can I just very quickly dig down a little bit? I imagine a number of us might want to do virtual visits of different sorts. Like if some people are going to the zoo and some people are watching the zoo online? Like, I know how to go to the zoo. What does it look like to make it, interesting for people who are virtually joining?
Yeah, I think it was a conscious effort of that team to kind of rotate through. So one, they have the personal connection with their teacher. And so, oh, it's my teacher on the screen now. But being cognizant of not ignoring and just simply, live casting the experience, but actually interacting with students that were online. And like I said, I think sometimes in experiences that are new, even as somebody who's pretty open to innovation and new things, my bar is set lower than it should be. And so that's been another sort of professional lesson for me, that I need to increase my bar to elevate the experience. But students constantly just impress and amaze me in terms of their functionality and navigation of this experience. And it was quite powerful. I think the other piece too, and some people have alluded to it in the chat, there's this shift in world, and we can't get into good, bad, or indifferent, but we also had parents engaging in this field experience, in this experience virtually, in person. And that was also exciting. So they're shoulder to shoulder with their child, and the child's asking now it's truly this partnership. And I know with certainty that doesn't exist for every single family. But what excites us is that it also gives us a gauge on kind of what that looks like, which tied into a sort of like check and connect model that if there's an opportunity, I can share some of that.
Rebecca Reynolds asked, I'd be curious to know about whether the N of participants was smaller, about the same, or larger in the programs you ran. I think this is more for Bill or Jessica. It's smaller, larger, different people?
In our case, we had the advantage that we had the in-person first. So there was a lot of connections and friends and all that already in existence. What was happening is when new members came in, as Adam said, my bar was pretty low. I said, how are the new members going to connect with the old members? Because the old members already had all the connections personally. And I think it worked in the sense that it was kind of interesting for some of the new members to introduce themselves, and then the old members connecting with them. I was surprised, to be honest with you. So one of the lessons learned I've had is my bar has risen a little bit here also, in the sense that the youth somehow made the connection because they were going and working on common projects that they were interested in. So if somebody was interested in designing automobile car wheels or hubcaps, somebody else was also interested in that, and that's how forced the connection. And I thought it worked. So we expanded. I would say the scale was a little more going remotely. I guess the big question that we're wrestling with, should we go back to some form of physical?
Yeah, I would say it depended on the program about the number of participants. Our camps were surprisingly larger than we anticipated. Some other programs like those virtual tours of colleges and everything were huge numbers. Some just had 2 to 3 people in them. And we counted it as a win. We're just like 2 to 3, 50, whatever it is, we're gonna count it as a win. And I say that because the shift for my staff was already one that was pretty tough because we are designed to be such a, in-person, very interactive program. And so I already knew that shift was going to be something that was a bit of a struggle. So if it was 2 kids in it, okay, great. If it was more, great. We just, that was my way of just keeping that morale and everything. And we, just as I stated before, we certainly reached new people, saw great connections. We certainly saw people who, like I said, just would say, I never could come in because of a work schedule, because of, of a disability where I spoke about mobility issues, social anxieties, different things like that. And, being able to have it online help them. And so I believe that we will always have, we've gone back to in person, but there will always be some type of hybrid component to a good bit of our programs because we've seen that. And yeah, so whether it was 2 or more, we were just like, great. Just especially at the beginning when everything was still very new. But we also took away from that, everybody talks about, the fatigue of being online all day. So, we didn't have, multiple hour programs. They were very short, intensive programs. Also, we were very intentional about where we would talk, but my staff made a lot of video work. That was really great for them to be able to look at, but also reference. So if, for example, we did a comic book creation program, it was a 4-week program, just an hour every Wednesday for 4 weeks. And my staff member pulled together the curriculum, but there were parts of it that he videoed. And so, he was able to say, hey, if you, missed a little bit of it, or if you need to go back through it, he would stay online to also help a little bit afterwards. But also, here's that full list of videos and curriculum and outline that you could also reference. And what that ended up doing was helping the kids who, maybe fell behind a little bit, couldn't get online right away, different things like that. It helped kids who maybe had to miss one of the weeks and they could still keep up. It helped also with, we also shared it with other library systems in Tennessee. And it was a program where we were like, you can scale this down or you can scale this up, and here are the references for it as well that you could use, even if you're not an artist, but you would still like to put on this type of program. So those are just some of the things that we were able to do with that online component.
There's a question in the chat about collaboration with parents or community organizations, which is a big theme right now in this space as well. It should be like hundreds of years overdue. But have there been opportunities to connect, collaborate, co-design with parents or other community organizations? Adam, I see you nodding. You want to go first?
Yeah, so we have like I said before, Tacoma prides itself on partnerships, and so it was exciting to see some of our existing programming with some of our partners, whether it be Parks and Rec, the city, multiple nonprofits throughout the city or the region, pivot with us and really come up with kind of creative ways to not lose that opportunity for students, because if there were ever a time when they needed those connections and opportunities, it was during the pandemic, and continues to be. And so what was exciting, and I had dropped it in the chat, but we saw some of our in-person engagements, and once again, we've now transitioned back, but with this fun sort of balance of kind of yes and. So this year we were able to start engaging some of those in-person clubs or extended learning opportunities, plus opportunities for students to access outside of that actual in-person engagement. And so as we found that, and one of them is really dynamic, and it's our Beyond the Bell program. And so we actually utilize some of our secondary learners to facilitate clubs for some of our primary. And it's coupled with an adult. So whether it's a staff member within our district or one of our community partners, whether it be the YMCA or like I said, Parks and Rec, there's these really interesting opportunities. And during pandemic, we saw programming shift and actually expand because students had opportunity to deliver in an online way, which simultaneously we discovered gave them some confidence that they didn't necessarily have in an in-person scenario in terms of facilitating, younger students. And so once again, not perfect, but it's letting us like gather some of these different wins to then redesign with our partners around what helps us grow, what helps us be better. So that's been an exciting sort of celebration and victory that probably wouldn't have occurred had we not had to navigate the pandemic.
You know, the one thing that's worked for us is not so much the community engagement, but it's been more other nonprofit engagement. We got a call through our remote program of another nonprofit in a county east of Orange County, California, where we're located. And at Riverside County, they did not have these kinds of programs at all, like the clubhouse program, after school program, et cetera. So they have a youth organization, fairly large, that just got a significant grant. And they wanted to open up a clubhouse and a remote clubhouse working with us. So we're going to be able to expand to that county as a partnership. And I think it's going to be, we're kind of really exploring all the avenues of the partnership right now, see if we can open up something in the September, October timeframe, assuming COVID and, you know, all those things get to rest. So it's a great opportunity for us. The only other thing that's kind of interesting is how our global effort has grown.